still remember the day Nadia called me. Her voice carried the same warmth it always had, though distance and years had stretched our friendship thin. She didn't waste time with small talk. Instead, she asked me for a favor that, on the surface, seemed simple. Her son, Daniel, had finished his first year at university and wanted to spend his summer break in Lahore. Could he stay with me? I hesitated, though I didn't know why. It wasn't as if our house lacked space. My husband, Faraz, worked long hours, often away for business trips, and I kept myself busy with freelance design projects. A little company might even brighten the monotony. Still, there was something in Nadia's request that made my chest tighten, a whisper I couldn't name. I pushed it aside and said yes. After all, what are old friends for? The day Daniel arrived, the hesitation returned. He stepped out of the car with a quiet confidence, no longer the lanky boy I vaguely remembered trailing behind his mother years ago. At 19, he had grown into sharp features and a disarming smile that seemed to command attention without trying. I caught myself staring too long before quickly masking it with a polite embrace. Faraz greeted him with courteous formality, though his smile was the kind that lasted only as long as politeness required. That was Faraz in every way: dutiful, predictable, a man who believed consistency was love's highest proof. I had grown used to that rhythm, though sometimes it left me aching for something less restrained, something that reminded me I was still alive. From the first evening, Daniel disrupted that rhythm. At dinner, he filled the silence Faraz and I had grown accustomed to with stories, questions, and laughter that felt like sunlight after too many gray days. He noticed details others overlooked, complimenting the way I seasoned the food, asking about my work as if it mattered. His presence unsettled me, though I told myself it was only the strangeness of hosting someone new. Yet deep down, I sensed it was more. That night, when the dishes were done and the house had fallen quiet, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My face looked different, flushed, lit by a spark I hadn't seen in years. I tried to dismiss it, reminding myself Daniel was my friend's son, practically family. But even then, a part of me knew. His arrival wasn't just a visit. It was the beginning of something I wasn't ready to face. Life settled quickly into a new rhythm, though it wasn't the one I had known before. Daniel adapted to the house with ease, moving through the rooms as if he had always belonged there. He carried an energy that unsettled the quiet patterns Faraz and I had built over years of routine. Where my husband filled silence with brief nods and perfunctory questions, Daniel filled it with curiosity, warmth, and laughter. At first, I tried to dismiss the contrast. After all, Faraz was not unkind, just steady, predictable, a man who valued duty above expression. I had convinced myself that stability was enough, that marriage was meant to be about endurance rather than passion. But in Daniel's presence, that conviction began to crack. He noticed things no one else did. If I wore a new shade of lipstick, he commented on it with an almost playful sincerity. When I prepared a meal, he asked about the recipe, lingering in the kitchen longer than necessary. His questions about my work carried genuine interest, not the distracted politeness I had grown used to. It was as though he saw me, not just the role I played as wife, hostess, caretaker, but the woman beneath, Faraz. Meanwhile, seemed almost grateful for Daniel's company, as though it excused him from trying. He worked late, spoke little, and let the boys' chatter fill the spaces he left behind. I watched this with a strange mix of relief and resentment. Relief because it lightened the silence. Resentment because it reminded me of everything my marriage lacked. The conflict began quietly, more within me than outside. I told myself Daniel was like a nephew, that my affection was maternal, even protective. Yet my body betrayed me. The quickened pulse when his hand brushed mine by accident, the restless nights replaying his words, the heat that rose to my cheeks when his gaze lingered a fraction too long. I wanted to believe it was harmless, that I could contain it. But each day he was under my roof. The boundary between what was proper and what was dangerous grew thinner. One evening, after Faraz had left on yet another overnight trip, I passed Daniel in the hallway. He smiled, not the casual smile of a guest, but one that held something unspoken, almost challenging. I felt the ground shift beneath me in that moment, though neither of us said a word. Later that night, lying awake in the silence of my bedroom. I realized something with a clarity that frightened me. This was no longer just a test of hospitality. It was a test of myself, of the vows I had once promised with conviction, but now carried like a weight. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to pass. The weeks that followed felt like walking along a fault line, every step ordinary on the surface, yet charged with an undercurrent I could not ignore. Danielle's presence had become a fixture in the house, his laughter echoing through rooms that once held silence. Each day blurred the line between familiarity and danger, and I found myself treading closer to a truth I wasn't ready to admit. It was during one of those sweltering summer evenings that the shift became undeniable. The power had gone out, plunging the house into semi-darkness. Candles flickered in the living room as we sat across from one another, the heat pressing down like an invisible weight. "You don't talk about yourself much," Danielle said softly, his eyes fixed on me in a way that felt far too intimate. "Did you always want this life?" The question startled me, not because it was inappropriate, but because no one, not even Faraz, had asked me something so piercing in years. I laughed it off, reaching for the safety of indifference. "Life doesn't give us everything we want. We learn to live with what it does." "But you deserve more than just living with it," he replied, his tone earnest, almost insistent. His words lodged themselves inside me, unsettling the fragile balance I had kept. That night, I lay awake long after he had gone to his room, the echo of his voice replaying like a confession I was too afraid to make aloud. From then on, I noticed every detail with sharpened awareness. The way his hand lingered a second longer when passing me a glass, the warmth in his voice when he asked about my day, the ease with which he filled silences Faraz never bothered to bridge. Guilt gnawed at me, yet so did longing. The conflict deepened further when Faraz announced another business trip, leaving Danielle and me alone for several nights. I tried to distract myself with work, with chores, with anything that kept me from the quiet pull of his presence. But temptation has a way of growing in silence. One evening after dinner, we stood side by side washing dishes. His arm brushed mine, a simple accidental contact, yet it sent a jolt through me. I froze, dish in hand, my pulse racing as if my body had betrayed me. He didn't move away. Instead, his voice lowered, almost a whisper. "Auntie, you feel it too, don't you?" The words shattered the fragile pretense I had built. I wanted to deny it, to restore the wall between us, but my silence said more than any denial could. For the first time, the truth lay bare between us, not spoken fully, yet undeniable. That night, as I closed my bedroom door, I knew something irreversible had begun. It wasn't just about Danielle anymore. It was about me, about everything I had silenced, suppressed, and sacrificed. And the question that haunted me was no longer if a line would be crossed, but when. The breaking point came on a night when the house was steeped in silence. Faraz had left on another trip, and the emptiness of his absence weighed heavily. Danielle suggested we sit in the garden to escape the oppressive heat indoors. The air was still, carrying the faint scent of jasmine, and the quiet between us stretched longer than usual. At first, we spoke of trivial things, his studies, his plans for the future, but soon the conversation deepened. "You always listen," he said, his voice low. "With you, I feel understood. Do you even know how rare that is?" His words struck me harder than I wanted to admit. I had grown so accustomed to being invisible that being seen felt intoxicating. I tried to respond lightly, but my voice faltered. "I'm only doing what anyone would." "Not anyone," he insisted, leaning closer. "Not him." The unspoken comparison hung in the air. I looked away, my pulse hammering, torn between indignation and the raw truth of his words. Faraz had provided stability, yes, but somewhere along the years he had stopped truly seeing me. Danielle's gaze, in contrast, was unwavering, almost unbearable in its intensity. Then came the moment I could no longer deny. His hand found mine, deliberate this time, not accidental. My first instinct was to pull away, but my fingers trembled and stayed. The contact was electric, charged with everything we had been avoiding. "This is wrong," I whispered, though even I could hear the weakness in my protest. "Then tell me to stop," he replied softly. But I couldn't. The truth was written in the silence that followed, in the way my breath caught, in the way my heart betrayed me. When he leaned in, the space between us collapsed. His lips met mine, tentative at first, then certain, as though a dam had broken and could no longer be contained. For a fleeting moment, I surrendered. The years of loneliness, the hunger to be seen, the ache of neglect, all of it poured into that single act. It felt like fire and release, like stepping into a forbidden world I had secretly longed for. But the aftermath was immediate and crushing. I pulled back, breathless, my heart pounding with equal parts desire and dread. "This can't happen again," I said, though the words tasted hollow. He searched my face, his eyes heavy with something between sorrow and defiance. But he didn't argue. He simply nodded, as though we both understood that no matter what I declared, nothing would ever be the same. That night, as I lay awake in the stillness of my room, I realized the conflict was no longer about temptation alone. It was about the fracture within me, the wife who owed loyalty, and the woman who longed to be alive again. And though the kiss had ended, the battle had only just begun. When summer ended, the house felt strangely hollow. Daniel packed his bags with quiet efficiency, and though he smiled politely, there was a heaviness in his eyes that mirrored my own. Faraz helped load the luggage into the car, oblivious to the current flowing between us, the unspoken words that clung to every farewell. Nadia called later that evening, her voice full of gratitude. "You've been so kind to him, Amina," she said warmly. "He told me he felt at home with you." Her trust pressed against my chest like a weight I could barely carry. I thanked her, my voice steady even as guilt pulsed beneath every syllable. In the days that followed, silence returned to the house. Faraz slipped back into his routines, steady and reliable, never noticing the fissures inside me. Perhaps he did notice in small ways, lingering glances when I seemed distant, a softer tone when he asked about my day. But he didn't question, and I didn't confess. Some truths, once spoken, cannot be undone. Instead, I turned inward. I began to reclaim pieces of myself I had long ignored, picking up sketches I had abandoned, taking long walks alone, allowing myself to breathe without apology. It wasn't a solution, not entirely, but it was a start. Yet at night when the house was still, memories crept in. The touch of his hand, the weight of that kiss, the way he had looked at me as though I mattered in ways no one else had dared. I wondered if I had imagined it all. If it was less about him and more about the emptiness I had been trying to fill. Was it betrayal? Was it awakening? Or was it both? Two truths entangled in a moment that neither of us could erase. I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to answer that fully, but I do know this. Sometimes the deepest conflicts are not between people but within ourselves. And sometimes the choices we make in silence are the ones that define us most.